Hey, welcome everyone. Glad to see you here. I'm Justin Liszanckie. I'm head of accounts at The Break, EM's Creative Forward sister agency. Been working with EM for over a decade now. Seen a lot of changes in the marketing space over those years. And AI obviously, is the biggest game changer that I've seen. I think probably many of us have seen. And so excited to speak with Thomas today about developments in the space. And I will let Thomas introduce himself here.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So my name's Thomas Smith. I've spent the last 15 years or so running an AI-powered photography agency. And I also do AI and marketing consulting for all kinds of companies, everything from sort of large institutions to educational organizations to individual other agencies and a lot of web publishers. I have a degree in AI from Johns Hopkins University. I have had my work featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, IEEE Spectrum. It's an OpenAI beta tester, so I've been doing this for a long time, and I absolutely love AI. And I'm here to hopefully shed some light on how you all can use it in your own marketing workflows, how I've used it with clients, and to answer some questions about how it's kind of changing this industry very dramatically.
Love it. Great. Thanks for being here. We've been hearing a lot about the workforce evolving, obviously. I myself and a few of my colleagues were at SaaStr, where the cloud meets, about a month ago. And, the messaging was pretty clear there. Jason Lemkin, the founder of SaaStr, painted a somewhat stark image, I would say, just about this idea of marketers having to do basically twice as much, but maybe with half the head count, and definitely needed to do it with AI. One of the phrases that stuck out to me there, if you're not using AI, you're losing. And so, for us marketers in the room, it felt maybe potentially pessimistic. Ended on a high note. I think one of the main moats that was talked about was, brand still will be reigning supreme, still need creativity, still need people to figure out how to set up these AI systems, manage AI. I'm just kind of wondering, maybe, starting at a high level here, do you kind of agree with that messaging, we heard from SaaStr? What have you been hearing in the field? How are you thinking about these kinds of things these days?
Yeah, so I think it's true, unfortunately, for a lot of folks, that there's a huge amount of change happening, and there's a huge amount of the kind of disruption you're describing. What I've seen personally, and I think what the statistics bear out, is that it's not affecting everybody equally. So what I've seen in my own work and work with clients is that on the kind of highest end of things, the strategy side, the people who are making content choices, who are deciding what a brand is going to stand for, that is still largely preserved. That's something that humans are still needed for and that the AI can't really do effectively. The kind of core creative functions that we all do as marketers, that's still there, and if anything is actually more important. We'll get to why that is. On the kind of most tactical side of things, there's also not only it's sort of been preserved, but it's actually been kind of enhanced a lot. People who are doing like VAs, for example, who are doing the very basics of loading content into a CRM or to a content management system, that kind of stuff. That is, if anything, there's been growth in that space. There's so much AI content out there that needs to be processed and handled. There's been a hollowing out, though, of the middle. And I think that's where the biggest disruption I've seen has taken place, where the people who would have been writing the content, editing the content, it's much harder to compete in that space without using AI to automate a lot of what you do. And so I've spoken to people who had thriving content editing businesses, and that's disappeared in the last 6 months because the AI has reached a point where it's good enough that it's sort of removing that middle piece. So I think it's a pessimistic story if you're in that space and you're not willing or able to implement AI in your own processes. But if you're more on the sort of strategic side, you're the human making the choices and guiding the strategy for a brand or for a company, there's even more need for that because now you can do anything. You can come up with an idea, and with really limited budget, you can do some pretty incredible stuff if you can do the automation piece of it correctly with AI. but you still have to have that idea and you still have to know what's going to work for the brand. And so I think that's more important than ever. And we can talk about, specifically what that means for all of us out in the fields. But yeah, that's what I've observed. And I mean, a couple of stats that I'll just throw out there. 88% of marketers are now using AI. And in the content space, it's actually 93%. So if you're not thinking towards how can I build that into my own process, how can I use that with my own clients, you're competing with people who are, basically, is the bottom line.
Yeah. How many people here are using AI in there? Anyone? Mm-hmm. It's pretty high number. Yeah, I think that that's another kind of theme we heard is you've got all these tools. You definitely should be getting your hands on them. You should be exploring as many of them as you possibly can to figure out which ones are the right answers for your particular use case or problems you're trying to solve. But don't assume that AI is just going to kind of solve all your problems for you. You might be able to produce a bunch of stuff, but if you're still just being generic about it and not thoughtful about it, that's not what's going to get you ahead. It's going to be that very strategic thinker that figures out the best way to kind of leverage those tools and kind of get ahead that way. Which I just kind of hollowing out of the middle and just kind of that trying to figure out how to lead with that strategic mindset and kind of emphasizing the opportunities there, I think. And kind of following on to that, how are you thinking about marketers having to be, the human in the loop here? How can you get a little more specific about how maybe they should be working with AI in your opinion?
Yeah, so my specialty is that human in the loop AI. And what that really means in practice is that you're not trying to replace every part of a process with AI. You're still basically trying to keep a human involved in it, but you're trying to enhance what that person can do. So where maybe one person would have been able to do some core part of the process before, now they can take on the entire thing. They can be a one-person marketing team, essentially by handing off the other functions to the AI. And so what that turns us into is really less kind of creators of a lot of this and more almost curators. And so the way I encourage people to think about it is you almost have to treat the AI systems that you're using like you would treat an employee that you're working with and managing. And I think a mistake I see a lot of people make is kind of doing all of the stuff that they would have done in their process before, and then going over to like ChatGPT, copy pasting something in, getting some result back, and then going back to exactly what they would have done before, and just sort of using it like one little tool that they still pretty much have to be very hands-on with. Where I've really seen it become much more powerful is when you lay out systems and processes and figure out where can the AI fit in and really make it very formalized so that it's something that's repeatable and it isn't just, I need a Facebook post, I'll go ask ChatGPT to write one for me. It's good enough, I'll put it back in. And so what that looks like in practice is instead of literally just going to one of these chatbots and asking for something and expecting it to give you a good result, which I think a lot of people do, the result usually sucks. Then they're disappointed and they think AI is bad. Then they kind of abandon it and then they lose out on the opportunity to automate and do better. The better way to do it is to try to lay out in as much detail as possible exactly what the process is going to look like. So for a lot of my clients, our prompts to some of these LLMs could be 15,000 words long. And it's going to be not just write me a social media post. It's going to be, here's 100 posts that have succeeded for us in the past. Here's 100 that have failed. Here's all of the things that we learned at this industry conference. Here's my PowerPoint that I worked, I took notes from it. Here's all the guidelines that we give to our junior employees when they join the team. Here's our brand doc. Here's our voice, laying out all of our style guides, all this kind of stuff. That will be one prompt to create a social media post or a blog post. And in that case, you're not relying on the world knowledge, what we call world knowledge of the model, the way that it was trained, the stuff that it learned from its training data. You are basically using it to transform much more specific data, stuff that relates exactly to your process or your client's process and their brand and their voice and all that. And that's when it really becomes powerful, and it can actually start to be something that really kind of multiplies what you can do, because then you're getting something out that's genuinely useful, and it's not just this sort of piecemeal, oh, I'm going to go to ChatGPT and ask it for some ideas, and I'm going to kind of choose one and send it along and hope that it works. It's really guided by the much deeper work that most brands, most companies have already done, and in this case, guided by your own expertise. If you've been doing this for a long time, you can build out those prompts, you can build out those processes that you're handing off to the AI and instruct it, just like you would if you were managing a team of 10 or 20 or 30 people. And if you treat the AI like that, and you give it the data that it needs and the guidance that it needs, that's where I've seen it really, reach the point where you might be able to generate. I mean, I work with clients who are creating thousands or tens of thousands of articles for websites in a month using AI, and it's powerful. Their audience loves it because they've done the work to do it properly.
I mean, it's still important to kind of think of it as a new hire. I mean, you may have hired the most brilliant person in the world, but there's obviously a level of onboarding and getting them up to speed on, what your strategy is, what your brand guidelines are, your tone of voice, for instance, if you're creating content, and just, thinking of it more as a true coworker than a tool, maybe, is kind of what it sounds to me a little bit like what you're saying.
Absolutely, yeah. And even, you talk about language, giving it things not to say. There's tells, there's giveaways that, basically bustling and nestled in and all these kinds of things. Furthermore, I could rattle off,
Diana's got thoughts about nestled in.
Yeah, there's these words that we all know, and I think a lot of users know at this point, signal that this is AI generated. And one of the things I do with clients is we have a list of words that the AI shouldn't use, and you give it that list with every single prompt, and it avoids sounding like a robot, basically. So I think there's a lot of ways to guide it, and I think the metaphor of, it's like an employee is perfect, because if you can guide it with the same level that you would a person, that's where you're going to see the best results.
Yeah. Great. So, kind of, we got a room of marketers over here. What would you say that marketers should be doing right now to kind of position themselves in the right way in this new world of AI? Thoughts around upskilling. There's obviously a lot to learn in the world of AI, and there's new tools coming out all the time. Anything specific you might want to share in that regard?
Yeah, I'll share the sort of broad overview and then a couple of tools that I think are great. I think broadly, like a lot of people say, okay, I want to automate with AI. I want to automate some of my marketing functions. What's the thing that you use for that? As if there's one piece of software that I know about and I'm not telling people about or something like that. And that's really not the case. What I tell people is to be model agnostic. So don't feel that, I'm using ChatGPT, or I'm using Claude, or I'm using Perplexity, and everyone else must be using some other more powerful, better thing. The landscape is changing so quickly that literally week to week, one model might be better at something else than another, and then they'll leapfrog and one will suddenly, outpace the other. Like right now, Claude, really great at coding. OpenAI's most recent model of O3, it's fantastic at doing sort of strategy and analyzing data. OpenAI 4.5, great at writing, but that'll change, like that'll shift. So I recommend that people try out all the different models and get a sense for what's working in that current moment, but know what functions you do in your job that you would want AI to help you with. And then you can start to say, okay, if I'm going to, for a lot of my folks, it's like, I need to create a blog post that's SEO optimized in, for example, like a hobby niche. And this is going to be a B2C, it's going to be an affiliate marketing type of play. So I need to figure out the idea for the content. I need to figure out what things I should cover within it. I need to write the individual sections. Maybe I need to generate some illustrations or infographics to go into that article. I need to be strategic about keywords to include and do background research on what my competitors are doing. Each of those functions, you can start to pair up and say, okay, if I'm going to do the image generation, right now, a diagram, an image generation platform is great. It's perfect for that. I'll use that. But then, when OpenAI comes out with their most recent version and it's better, you just switch that function. Okay, now my image generator is this. Now my writer is this. And so that's the way I think is best to look at it, is to not try to hone in on one specific tool, but know the things you want AI to do, and then find the tool that in that given moment is best, and in some cases cheapest. If you're doing this at scale, if you're generating thousands of pieces of content or social posts or whatever it might be, choosing a model that's efficient, that's fast, and that's inexpensive can make a big difference. Specific tools, one that I love that I think is kind of perfect for people who maybe have some technical knowledge, but you're not a coder. Make.com is really great. People might have used it before. It's sort of a general automation platform, but it's almost like a drag and drop kind of flow chart, and you can tie it into a bunch of different things. You can tie it into like HubSpot or other kinds of CRMs. You can tie it into WordPress, content management platforms. You can tie it even into your own Gmail and that kind of thing. And then you can also add an AI layer into that. So I'll give an example. I work with a publication that wanted to automate their social media posting. And so we used Make.com. This was something where they didn't want me to have to always do it. So we used Make.com, and we set up a function that looked at the RSS feed for their website. Anytime a new post was published, it would grab all of the text and the images from the post. It would feed that into an OpenAI assistant, which is something you can build within the OpenAI platform. That would take all of their best practices and, like I was describing earlier, the 15,000 word document about how to write a post, and the content of that article and the images, write the actual copy for the post, and then actually post it to the Facebook. So it was the Facebook page for them. So it was a completely automated process in that case. And Make.com can allow you to do that without having to write Python code and get into it. So that's one I like. Zapier is another one. Gumloop is another one in that space that a lot of people are using now. But overall, I would just say an openness to doing whatever works in the moment and really being willing to experiment with all these models, and just realizing that there's not one right answer that everybody else knows and you don't know. And if you're using ChatGPT, you're somehow doing it wrong. These models are powerful, and there's a lot of different options. So yeah, model agnostic, be willing to use any of them.
This example with Make, how long would it take to set up, or how long did it take to set up that kind of AI flow so that all of these things were happening automatically when the post would go live?
I'd say 1 to 2 hours for me. So it can be done pretty quickly.
Is that because of your coding skills though?
Yeah, there's a learning curve,
yeah.
Which is good because as a consultant, it's a service you can sell. It's not something that everybody can just do for themselves. If you can become good at it,
yeah.
You don't have to be an AI engineer. I'm not an AI engineer. I have a background in AI, but it's theoretical. It's not necessarily as a software engineer.
Yeah.
But that said, if you can learn how to use these tools, it is it's something that people are looking for. And in particular, I've found that with a lot of clients at this point, even if you're doing a core marketing function that has nothing to do with AI, it's almost like a barrier to entry that you have to have some AI knowledge or experience. And you have to articulate, here's what I do with AI. Here's how I know how to use AI. So if you even have done something like using Make or Zapier or Gumloop or any of these to automate some process for a client or for yourself in serving clients, it's also a great thing to articulate to future clients about here's how I've used AI and here's how I could use it for you.
Kind of on the higher level, what you were talking about earlier, like one person marketing teams, to step it up from just this one specific tool use case, building out, full functional workflows, so that you can be a one person marketing team. Is that how long is that taking to kind of devise what that should look like and actually get the tools set up and integrated with each other? Are we talking days, weeks? How long until you're actually firing on all cylinders as the one-person marketing team?
So, what's interesting to me is that people assume that AI is the limiting factor, like a knowledge of AI or an ability to implement it. What I find is coming into a new client engagement, it's almost always the core marketing functions that need to be built first. And so people will say, okay, I want to automate all of my content generation and create SEO optimized blog posts at scale. I'll say, great. Okay, what's your SEO strategy? What are the keywords you're targeting? What's your, your target customer look like? How are you monetizing? And they'll go, oh, I have no idea. And we'll go in and look, and it's like, well, you're not even ranking in Google because you're using JavaScript for all your stuff, and you're not exposing any URLs, and you don't have a sitemap. And like that, I think, is the encouraging thing to me for folks here, is that it's usually the core marketing that's broken. And if you can fix that, that's usually the harder part, honestly. And once you can do that, the AI becomes just something that takes what you've done, that core marketing work, and makes it easier and more repeatable, and less expensive, and more powerful. But yeah, usually it's honestly not the AI that's the problem. I might spend a year fixing somebody's core marketing problem, and then a month or two building the AI, sometimes even less.
Got it. Okay. So all the expertise that the lovely specialists here in the room have acquired over the years is it's not all for nothing at this point.
Absolutely.
That's still critical.
The ability to work with a client, that's something that AI is not necessarily great at, and that's, I think that's a big thing that people overlook, is that piece of understanding the client need, understanding the customer that they're serving, understanding the persona that you're writing for, that kind of thing is essential. And if you do it wrong and you implement AI in a negative way, you can cause a lot of damage very, very quickly. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people who have ruined years worth of brand equity by doing something wrong and fast with AI. And so I think that element of taste, that element of curation, of knowledge of what the client needs is the most important thing. And if you have that, which I think most folks here do after a lot of experience, adding the AI into it is more about adapting a new technology to that existing field of knowledge and ability to work with people and ability to understand a brand and its needs. And it's a skill you have to learn. I do think that it's essential at the moment. I'm seeing that it's essential. It probably will become even more important. But yeah, it's that core function that's still the most powerful.
Yeah. That's at a different AI conference I went to, one of the notes that stuck out to me was that taste is the new skill. And as someone who runs a branding agency, obviously, being able to protect your brand and manage what that is deeply critical. And again, Jason Lemkin closes SaaStr by saying brand is the ultimate answer. So I know we're up on time here, but I did want to ask one more specific question for you before I open it to the floor here. Be tool agnostic, try to get your hands on the latest and greatest, know when certain tools are maybe better at certain functions than others. You're already trying to do more with less human resources, more AI resources these days. Just the evaluation of these things sounds to me like a pretty busy job. How do you know which one is the best at copywriting at any one time? How one is better at coding, especially when these things are changing so rapidly? Is it just you using them and making your own choice? Is there a wire cutter for AI tools that keeps you up to date week in and week out on all of these things? Like, how do you think about that?
I think for me, that's a big part of what I do for clients, is to be the person who follows all this
so
stuff.
So hire you.
Yeah, don't want to pitch, I think that it's important to either have somebody that's doing that. There's a lot of newsletters that that are out there, but the challenge there is that a lot of times people are just pushing tools that they get a cut of.
Right, yep.
So it's hard to find good quality information. I think that the best thing to do as an individual really is just to play with it a lot and experiment a lot with these kinds of things. I think it's important whenever possible to have some kind of project you're working on for yourself that you can use these tools with that's a lot lower risk. If there's a side hustle or some kind of personal, brand, or not your personal brand, but some kind of personal project that you've wanted to build, it's a great time to do it. I have a friend in the marketing space who has a very successful agency, and he has been building these like AI calculator sites to help people do basic functions like hobby types of things, like measurements and calculators and all this kind of stuff that before you'd have to hire somebody to do JavaScript and build a whole interface and stuff. And he just uses it as a way to practice these tools, and if one of them breaks or he does something that ruins his SEO, it's not a big deal. So I think it's good to have that hands-on experience, and just to be willing to experiment and try stuff, but ideally not with a client's live project.
Or their budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I know we're already over the time we were allotted here, so I want to turn it over to the floor if anyone has specific questions for Thomas. Now's your chance. Diana.
So I'm curious because my focus is content marketing. What with this massive proliferation of like so much content out there, who's reading it? And
I know. Did you say thousands of articles a month? I was like, that's a lot.
Yes.
yeah, is AI going to read it somehow and ingest it and recommend it? Like, there's just too much content.
So what I've seen is that the shelf life of an individual piece of content has changed dramatically. So before, the model was, in the content space, was you create this giant cornerstone article. It's 4,000 words or it's 10,000 words or whatever. You put all this research into it. You throw hundreds or thousands of dollars at budget to optimize it. You hire a photographer to take original photos for it, and then it ranks. It's out there, or it's your money page and you're directing customers to it from your newsletter or whatever, and that lives for 5 years, and you basically make back all the investment in it. And that was the paradigm pre-AI. At this point, what I'm seeing is that it's moved from that to much more kind of discovery-oriented content, stuff that's much faster to read, much faster to create, and that has a shelf life of maybe a couple of days. So where people were going to Google before, maybe they're now finding things through Flipboard, or they're finding things through Newsbreak, or another platform that's kind of sending them these articles, and it's a one-off thing, and they're going to read it, and it's going to get a big bump of traffic, and it's going to disappear in a couple of days. So that's what I'm seeing, is that with the large volume of content, it's not so much that people have way more attention and there's more and more time to read all this stuff. It's that the content that would have lasted 2 or 3 or 5 years before now lasts 1 or 2 days. And so you have to be able to create it quickly, make profit from it in the short time period, or drive some other brand value, like getting somebody to your newsletter where you can then have a deeper relationship with them, et cetera, in a much, much shorter time. So most of the content appears, serves its function in a very short time, and disappears, and that's where that volume's going.
Mark?
So I work with a number of clients who have varying degrees of how much they're using the AI tools to make their jobs better. Have you seen any people who've done it better or worse? I mean, I try and look at my own processes and err on the side of trying to do some agentic stuff and trying stuff out to improve myself. Have you seen what are the best ways to inculcate a client and a marketing team with AI capabilities, bring them up to speed?
I think in a lot of cases, it's to do the same thing that they were doing before, using AI, without them having to even care that it's AI or how it's being done. So I think in a lot of cases, if you're serving a client and they have a particular need, and what they get back from you, or what they get back from the AI or from their own process, is exactly what they got before, but it's faster and it requires less resources to create, then that's often a win. And so I find a lot of clients, they don't care at all whether what you're building for them or what they're getting is created by AI or a team of people you've hired and distributed all over the world, or whatever it is, as long as the results match the need that they have. That's where the most value comes in. But
I was thinking more along the lines of how do you get them all, the whole team, to start using all the tools?
yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Yeah, so I think to make it as easy and straightforward to do as possible, so that and to make it as automatic as possible, so that you're kind of sitting down. I mean, the example I gave of using Make to automate a specific process, I think, is a good one to answer that question, because that's an instance where you can sit down with a team once, hash out how the AI is going to work, set up the automation, and then it's done. And they don't have to keep going to some AI tool to do it every single day. So that's a piece of it, making it automatic. I think one of the reasons that ChatGPT took off I mean, I mentioned I was a beta tester for OpenAI in 2021, so way before ChatGPT, and it was so clunky to work with this stuff at the time. And I don't think that they realized when they released ChatGPT that it would be so successful. And really the only success was that it was so much easier to interact with. And there was no change to the underlying models. And it blindsided them, frankly, because they hadn't done anything in their minds. All they did was built a decent interface around it. Of course, like we're laughing because of the marketing side. We know that's everything. I think the same thing applies to internal teams. It has to be as frictionless as possible. To the extent that you can create something where the knowledge is baked into the system, like even a custom GPT that has access to all of their documents and all of their information, or an OpenAI assistant. These are a little more complicated. You can do a bit more to configure them. In the end result, it has all the knowledge of the client, it has all their brand knowledge baked into it, and they can interact with it just like a typical ChatGPT instance. That's where I've seen people actually start to use it. If they're going to have to go and go to your documents and find the right prompt and paste it in and upload all the documents that give it knowledge and context, they're not going to do it. But if you can build that for them, and then it's just as easy as opening up stock ChatGPT and using it, then that's where I've seen teams actually use it. That said, it's very hard to get people to implement it a lot of the time, honestly.
I assume it's especially hard from an IT perspective at certain clients. I mean, is that continuing to be a major roadblock, do you find, or are you running into this?
It depends on the client. So there's people who know that they need to do things at scale and are willing to invest, and they know that it's going to take building some IT infrastructure, that Make.com or one of these automation tools isn't going to cut it. And in that case, it's custom Python development, it's servers that run this stuff. Maybe it's even creating their own bespoke LLM, or at least fine-tuning an existing model. That's a whole other ballgame from using something that kind of allows you to just add AI into an existing process. The people who know that they're going to need that are generally willing to invest in it. Mm-hmm. But what I found is that the tools these days they're built so that people can interact with them without the technical knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so I would actually say IT has been less of a roadblock to implementing a lot of this tech than it was for moving stuff to the cloud, for example, like moving stuff off of Excel spreadsheets on people's computers and into a Notion or a HubSpot.
Yeah. I think Aaron Levy was talking about that at Sasser, just like the notion of the cloud back in the day, and everyone was very reticent from an IT perspective, but feels like everyone just realizes how fast all of this stuff is moving, and again, you're going to get left behind if you are not up on it. Any other questions? Yeah.
Really quick question. When people started to use AI as search rather than Google and the other search engines, how quickly or how should marketers think about influencing the results that come up in ChatGPT and other AI?
This feels a little related to Diana's question. I was curious, content too, and you've mentioned SEO a few times, but I'm wondering also about that myself.
Yeah, that's a great question. So at the moment, it's a tiny amount of traffic. It's it's minuscule. It's probably less than 1% of a typical organization's traffic. At this point, it's going to come directly from ChatGPT and Perplexity and that kind of thing. That said, it often tends to be traffic that's further down the funnel than traffic that's even coming in from search, and certainly from social and other channels. So that's what I've observed, and there's data that backs that up, that if you're asking ChatGPT for comparisons, or what company should I use, what SaaS should I use for this particular thing, you're further along in the customer journey, and so that customer that does come from one of those platforms is usually further down the funnel and more valuable. So that's one thing I would say right up front, but it's still a trickle. I think it will grow, but in terms of how to sort of influence what's the SEO for these things, it's very different. So traditional SEO would have looked more at links, would have looked more at on-page stuff, technical things about the website. Most of that isn't especially relevant when trying to get into these generative platforms. What is very important is brand and the reputation of the brand and the places that it's talked about. And so a lot of stuff that, and forgive me if I'm getting too SEO deep here, because this is another area I've done a lot of work in, But before, people would have said, well, I only want links that are a do follow link, a link from a website where it's basically a real vote for the quality of what I'm doing. Now it's completely different. It's all about how is your brand talked about, how are customers talking about it on sites like Reddit, on forums, what kind of reviews have been posted about your company, what major publications have covered your company or client. So it's very much tied to the knowledge that the LLM can derive from all those sources about who you are or who your brand is, or your client's brand, and what they do. So it's much more, the game is much less about, I need X number of links and I need this kind of content and these keywords in it. It's much more about how do I get the conversation going in as many places as possible about this brand, and how do I make sure that when that brand is being discussed, what's being said about it is accurate and complete. And that's really where I see the most value in what we can do to influence it. It's probably a little bit early to expect big results from it, but it's essential to start now because it's going to be significant.
Yeah, I have to assume the number of people coming from those is going to increase pretty quickly and pretty soon. And further down the funnel, I think the entire, sales, like customer journey is just shrinking now too because of the way people are able to more quickly dive in to some of the discovery work that they're doing. We had another question over here. Yeah, Todd?
Yeah, thank you. I'm real curious to know, we all probably work with AI, and to some degree we're, fairly knowledgeable of it. But where would you recommend to go to, really learn how to dive into it deeper to do the kind of things that you described, to really use it as a tool that's not just for this one-off search for a blog post? It's really using it in the strategy that we're doing.
It's hard because it moves so fast that there's not like one resource that I would say does an incredible job at following it. I honestly think that a lot of it is really being hands-on and experimenting for your own use cases. And I wish I had this is the newsletter you need to follow, this is the YouTube channel you need to subscribe to. The reality is that because it is so fast moving, by the time someone's even made a tutorial about something, remember ChatGPT plugins? That was the big thing. It was going to connect to OpenTable and pull that, all this. That's gone. It's completely gone. So I think it's much more valuable if you can be that person for the people that you serve. And that just means being willing to go in and experiment with it. There's a couple I can think about and maybe send out afterwards, some of the resources that I would specifically recommend. But if you're thinking, there's one place to go to learn it and I'm missing that place, you're not. There's no one who really is doing it comprehensively. And so again, that's an opportunity. If you can do that, even at a basic level, following for a specific client, here's where AI might impact what you're doing, here's where it might be valuable. That's an incredibly valuable function because they're not going to find that newsletter and be able to replace what you're doing for them at that point.
When you were talking about the custom GPTs, I guess this is sort of a two-part question. Are they being used more and more by marketing and specifically sales for things like playbooks and things like that, so that in real time they can kind of speak the message while they're on phones with prospects? Number one. And number two, if that's true, are the people using an API or make.com or something that connects the custom GPT to something like HubSpot, or are they just going straight to the UI of the custom, of like a ChatGPT app?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So what I've seen with custom GPT specifically is it's usually individual marketers or consultants who build a custom GPT to do something that they would otherwise do. I don't see them used a lot in teams very effectively. I've seen it a bit in smaller teams, startups, a small marketing team within a company, that kind of thing, where everybody kind of understands what you're going to use it for and what the goals are. They're so specific to one particular person's process, and they're relatively hard to customize deeply, that I haven't seen them used much more broadly beyond that. What does get used, because it can be more easily systematized and scaled, is OpenAI assistants. These are something you build within the OpenAI platform. It's like a custom GPT, but it's there's much more you can do with it, and it can also be linked into things like make.com, or a lot of other tools. There's standardized frameworks for you to be able to connect to it. So if you're creating something for yourself, maybe you have to write a report every single month to a client, and you have the data and you just want to be able to drop it in and get something, custom GPT is perfect. If you're trying to build something that, like the example of a social media post, takes all your processes, all of the ways, your style guide and all that kind of stuff, if you're doing content, keywords, that kind of thing, that would be a place to use an assistant. It's fairly easy to build them, and then it's something that can be scaled pretty dramatically.
Great. I'm seeing an autoplay ad again over here, which means we've definitely gone over time. So I'm gonna have to cut it there. But you're hanging around a little bit, right?
Yeah,
so we'll be able to continue this conversation. Thank you all for coming. Thomas, thank you for your time and expertise and thoughts. Really appreciate it. And let's get a drink.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah. All right. Great working with you on that.
Yeah, it was fun.